Welcome to Marc My Words, a podcast that not only aims to inspire and teach the listener about entrepreneurship, it also aims to give my guests an opportunity to talk about their unique journey in entrepreneurship and life. So join me and my guests as we meet at the crossroads on Marc My Words. Today on Marc My Words, I have a guest who gets paid to purchase, modernize, and generate revenue from properties. And they are the founder of Rockey Real Capital. They are co-founder of J&D Properties and Development. They also have two podcasts, one that I know the name of, and he's co-creator, producer, and co-host of, which is Marc and Joe podcast. But he also has a podcast that is about sports. I actually don't know. It's a cool premise. And if you're watching the video, Joe Rockey has Pittsburgh Steelers, the terrible towel, even his headset is decorated in Pittsburgh Steelers. And I'm sure he is a fan of my favorite team, the Pittsburgh Penguins. And I've been following Pittsburgh sports my whole life. And yeah, it is a pleasure to have you here, Joe. How you doing today?
Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm doing well.
And what's the name of that podcast that I could not remember the name of?
It's called Local Football Flavor.
Local Football Flavor.
Mm-hmm.
And the premise of that podcast is to basically talk to real fans about the real reality that you don't always hear about in the news. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. Because, everyone's had that experience of a national guy, really, regardless of what sport you're talking about, being completely wrong about your team. And we want to talk to locals who know what's really going on because, A, it helps you in all of your gambling for all those out there who are doing that, but also anyone who wants to win fantasy football or anything, knowing who is really the backup running back, who is really going to be the guy who's getting the targets. This is stuff that's important, especially as we're entering the season. We need to know who's actually going to be getting the ball.
Well, important for those of us like me who play DraftKings every week during the football season. That could be very valuable information for me. So
absolutely. Yeah.
I'll definitely be tuning in because you really never know when something's going to change, and just to have that in-depth information on who might actually be getting the carries or the targets. That means everything when you're putting 5, 10, $20 down on a game like I do to try to win even more money.
Sure. No, absolutely. And that's exactly why we exist and what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I definitely, I won I don't even know if I should talk about this here, but during the playoffs, I won $1,000 on a DraftKings game. So for me, I've won $25, $50 here and there. And, you win enough to win so you can play again the next week or whatever. But that was a pretty good amount of money. So it's I can't wait for this season. So
that's exactly what we're here for. And one of the things that I do a lot of myself is both FanDuel and DraftKings have this. They're called best ball leagues. So I use them for my mock drafts, because if you go on some of these mock draft sites, there's no real incentive. So people don't always care. But when you're putting some money on the down, you have a chance of winning something. Now you're making picks that are educated. And since it's a best ball league, it can be a forget it type situation. I just do the draft, see how it went out, kind of paid practice to get ready for the draft you're doing with your friends. And that's something, like I said, I really enjoy doing those. And I do those pretty much once a day from now until the start of the season here. I'll be doing one.
Well, that's awesome. I can't wait to tune into that and probably learn a thing or two because I think I'm good, but I'm not as good as I could be. And just for the record, for anybody listening, I don't have a gambling problem. I literally put like maybe I'll play like a $4 game or a $15 game or two, and I forget about it after that. So I'm not like a huge gambler, but definitely love fantasy football and even like NASCAR I get into. And I should probably get to the point of this episode. This is a dangerous topic because it's something that I'm really interested in. But if you're interested in that too, go check out Joe's podcast. And I am here to actually talk about your career path and your crossroads in life. That's what we're here for. So let's maybe if we have time, I'll ask you about the sad Pittsburgh Pirates because that's another topic that interests me so much. But I'm going to get into actually talking about your career path, and I'm not totally sure. I always go on LinkedIn and try to pick up like what somebody might have been passionate about or thinking about. Let's go back before you went to, and I'm gonna finally pronounce this right, Duquesne's University.
It's Duquesne.
Duquesne? Why? Yep. I think I keep telling myself it's Duquesne's. It's Duquesne.
Yeah, I don't know about that one, but yeah, Duquesne's where I went. Yeah, I ended up getting a double major there because when I was entering college, I effectively had this mindset, which I agree with being the truth, is you need to get skills. You get paid upon skills, not upon theory. So I wanted to make myself as universal as possible. So with that regards, I said, well, what does every business need to know? Well, they need to know where their money is and how to get more money. Every business in the world needs to know how to do that. And knowing where your money is, that's basically what accounting is. And my second double major is in finance, which is one of the ways to get more revenue or more money, rather, not revenue. And during my life really from when I was 18 on, I've been involved in sales. And it has been the blessing and the curse of life, because when you're living on commission only sales, there are these days that come in that are just absolute massive paychecks. And then there also can be periods, which I certainly lived through, where you have no idea when the next check's coming. So it's a very roller coaster ride, especially whenever you're just beginning. And it's very scary and stressful, to say the least. So that's really kind of the backdrop of what started me coming out of Duquesne, because I was also coming out during the last recession. And at the beginning of that senior year of college, I was given offers for good accounting jobs that, really would have been good. But I said no, because part of me was this arrogance that I'll hold out for something better and something higher paying and all that fun stuff. And lo and behold, it didn't really matter, because in the second semester in February, my classmates who had accepted those types of positions were getting notices and saying, hey, we have to lay off guys with 30 years of experience. We also aren't picking up anyone new either. So it became a lot of chaos at that point. And I ended up signing up with a company that did life insurance and annuities on a strictly commission basis, because if I failed, it mattered to them, they didn't have to pay me. So my first year I was rookie of the year, the second year I was underclassman of the year, and the third year I left. And there's a lot of different reasons I left. Most of them were structural to that specific company. Maybe some of it has to do with the industry, but long story short, it wasn't the place I wanted to be for what I thought it was going to be. I wanted to be able to be paid when I was older for work that I did when I was younger. And ultimately, the residual rate that I was promised, because they just tell you you're going to get residuals. I never sat down and did the math and figured out how much am I actually getting paid in these residuals until the checks started coming around in that third year. And I realized it was 0.1%, which also means you'd have to work 1,000 years for 1 year's worth of income. So obviously that wasn't working out. That's not the direction I wanted to go. And I at that moment essentially decided that I was going to be leaving the company. That was in the beginning of 11, and it took me a couple of months to figure out where I was going to go. I wanted to essentially explore all kinds of different options, and where I ended up selecting was this route of becoming a real estate investor, which I has had many turns since then. That was in 2011 is when I started that. My first flip we started in June 1st of, like I said, 2011, and since then we've had some wins, we've had some losses, a lot more wins than losses, but in the beginning there was certainly some losses there. And I created my first rental company after, so I did 2 flips. First one was a abysmal failure, the second one more than made up for it. And then I just had this mindset of use the profits from flips to go buy rentals. And then I started that first rental company in the beginning there. J&D is one of my partners that you mentioned there in the beginning that we've created a business with. And that was really what changed. Was I had this mindset I had to do everything myself in the beginning. And somewhere along the way, I realized that if I have partners that want to do the stuff I don't want to do and also may be able to bring some skills that I don't have, it really can multiply quickly. And that's exactly what happened. We transitioned to business a couple of times, but I ended up getting different partners that all wanted to do effectively the part I didn't want to do, the sales process, which was the prospecting end. I don't like sitting behind a desk to fill up my calendar. I like talking to the homeowner or the homeowner's children, depending upon the situation, about the house and what the situation is, what's going on. And that's really where I make more money, is being in the field rather than being behind my desk. So I found that I wanted to be behind the desk and never talk to anyone in the field. Apparently there's a lot of those people out there, and we started making some businesses, and then the businesses just kind of took off. Some of them became rentals. Some of them wanted to be just buy properties, sell them to other investors, and some of them wanted to do rent to owns. And now basically all I do is buy properties and sell them to other investors or rent to owns. That's essentially where our model's at in this post-COVID world.
So let me go back again a little bit.
Sure.
Because initially, before you transitioned into entrepreneurship, it seemed like you had, and just from listening to you talk, it sounds like at the very least you have like pretty strong math skills. Was that something you were good at? Was it something you were passionate about using, or did it just kind of unfold that way?
I think all of that. In my SATs, I had one question wrong on the math section.
Wow.
So I start by knowing it. But I think I know it because I like it, and it's something I like doing. And that's part of what got me into real estate is I like engineering. And that's certainly a mathematical element of all of it.
Well, at least we're on the opposite ends of the spectrum here, because I'm pretty sure I probably had just about every math question wrong on the SAT. I am absolutely horrendous at math. So it always fascinates me when I see somebody going into very mathematical jobs and career paths. And was there anything else that you were thinking about doing before college or had a passion for, or did it just kind of happen?
Well, on that note, and for anyone out there who's listening, I got messed up with accounting in the beginning there, because accounting's not math. I thought it was going to be math. Finance is math, but accounting's basically a language. And once I accepted that, it became a whole lot easier. But accounting is not math for the most part. So that in that regards was something I knew I needed to do because of the whole skill thing I told you before. But it was harder than I thought it was going to be because of that just misconception about where it being with math. So, but yeah, you're exactly right. It's something that I wanted to draw myself into, and it was just something that works. I like being able to build out a business model and see where the X's and O's in terms of the profit and loss can be and where the risk factor is. And that's really what my skill was entering into the real estate game. I had no idea how to do the actual work at all. Or how to manage the people. And that's why I failed the first flip, because I didn't really know how to manage the people. I didn't know what the job process is supposed to look like each step along the way. So I knew how to make the balance sheet and how to make the project planning and how to make it where we should be at this point and get all the revenue back. But it didn't, like I said, the first one didn't work out. And there was so many extra skill sets that came out of there. Learning how to talk to people was certainly one of them, and learning how to gauge myself, without anyone over my shoulder and me just being the one who's running the business and basically live or die. Because we have a commission job and it's live or die. You normally have a sales manager who gets a cut of your action, who's constantly breathing down your neck to make sure you're doing something. Well, I got rid of that. I went to go do it myself. So at a certain extent, I realized that there's a need for that, nowhere near as much as most sales managers do it, but there is a need to be on top of running your schedule, an incredible amount of self-discipline that needs to be found - created. And going from there really leads to building the businesses, and then building extra businesses on top of it, then eventually doing a podcast where I'm not doing it for money, and now doing Local Football Flavor where we are doing it for profit as well. So it really has just grown from that starting point of controlling yourself and controlling your mindset.
So how does somebody who is working for somebody and you're trying to follow that career path that you develop for yourself, how do you just go from that to saying, and without having a background in house flipping, construction, etc., how do you just say, you know what, I'm going to give this a try? Like, what made you want to do that?
Well, what made me want to do it was I didn't want to be working for them anymore. And once I made that mind up, I kind of came to the conclusion I probably don't want to work for anyone. I at least want to see what it's like working for myself. Because if that was going to be a goal when I'm 50, why not try it now when I'm 20? I can maybe learn something about it, or learn it shouldn't be a goal for me at all. Because there's a great group of people out there, and this is no disrespect, that just cannot work for themselves. Like, they need to have the structure and people around them. I get that. There's many times in this gig it can be incredibly lonely, and most people just aren't mentally equipped to deal with that, let alone the ups and downs of living a commission world. So, but if you did want to start from scratch, whether it be real estate or any venture that you're going into yourself, the two things I would recommend that you do before to get your own self in order is, first, get your credit score good. Because anytime, at some point, your business is going to need financial help. And the easiest way for someone to detect you is, do you have a good credit score? Because effectively that says, do you do what you say you will do in financial world? That's what your credit score really is. It's a truth test with mathematical numbers behind it. So get that taken care of, get that to a good spot. Get yourself prepared that you have enough in savings that if it takes a while to take off, you don't have to quit it. Because the most depressing thing I see is when people have a good idea or good business starting, but they're not able to survive the buildup. Because in their head, they think we'll start being profitable in 6 months. In reality, it's 24 months. And that's a fact of life. So yes, inherently, because you're starting this business, you think you can do something better than someone else, and you probably can, but it still doesn't mean that it's going to catch on to the rest of the world quickly enough. So that's where you see people trying to try out things. I personally don't recommend that. I would say save up enough that you can survive and then go all the way all in. Completely cut off all over ties. You don't need to burn the bridges, but you need to be far enough down that road where you're not going back. In my case, I burnt the bridges, but that was just who I am. But you don't need to do that. And that's really what I would recommend is make it that you have to survive on this. And inherently, it made it easier for me. I was in my early 20s. I was single. There was no one really, if I failed, that was going to really super care. It wasn't like if I did it now where I have a wife and kid, that's a different type of failure. But that being said, there are plenty of people who are in this situation now that start businesses. And where I would recommend with that is, don't try to do it all yourself. find someone who's experienced in whatever you're trying to do and figure out a way to partner up. And that's really what I have done. Is a lot of my partners had never done their own business or side gig or whatever you want to call it before. But essentially, I'm able to do a major part of the business. And as long as they can run a call center or fill up my calendar, Facebook ads, Instagram, whatever, some of them just built these little machines where they just put a couple bucks in at the beginning of the month and fills up my calendar, at the end of the month dash next month. And then they get a check, three months later as a result of it. So in their regards, once they built the machine, it was just feeding it, and then you get a better payout on the back end. So did they really know how to do that? Kind of not. They're never calling the people. They're not even sending out the mailers. It's all third-party companies doing all this. So I say all that to say that there are creative ways around the problems that all of us are going to have with our businesses, and don't try to do with the stuff that's not going to be profitable or that you don't really like that is profitable. Find someone that is going to be good at that and utilize them.
So you said a lot of really good things there, especially what you said at the very end. But you said something that I don't think anybody in the history of this show has really talked about, which is having a good credit score and preparing yourself in that way, having a good savings. I think one person might have talked about savings, but I've never heard anybody talk about credit score. Like, that's super important because it's good to be kind of whimsical, like I can be sometimes about, I have passion, I have dreams, and I want to accomplish all these things, but there's a whole other reality that, you got to bring yourself down from those whimsical clouds every once in a while and deal with the reality, the numbers, the credit score, because maybe to some people, maybe to somebody like you, that's the whimsical fun part. But for me, I'm just like, okay, that's like the real serious part that brings me down to reality, because that will truly make or break what you're doing. So
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you mentioned that.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're not fun. I mean, they need to be done. I don't want to try to make them sound like they're fun, but they're effectively, because at some point you are going to need, whether it be an angel investor, a loan, whatever, you're going to need to talk to someone who is not inside of your head and ask them for help in some capacity, whether it be, cash, capital, or expertise. You're going to need something from someone. And what shows effectively, is, were you a good adult in your prior life? Did you do what you say you would do in terms of paying people back? And if you're a bank, that's like the most important thing. Am I going to get paid back if I give you money? Sure, we don't know if this business is going to work, but it never existed before. There's no way to know. So do I want to be a part of it or not? And the other part I would recommend is don't be afraid of doing equity type deals with people where they get a part of the business, especially if they're bringing part of it that you don't want to do, because paying someone to do the part that you don't want to do is important. You're going to have to do it anyway. Might as well have them be invested with you to make it successful. And that's really how you can get things to grow much better, because it's better to get 50% of something successful than 100% of a failure.
Totally agree. Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. I mean, you can still learn something even on the 50% or 75% level. So I think that's great. And one thing that I want to ask before I forget. So you come into this path, and I know even for me, I worked in construction a little bit. I learned next to nothing because I wasn't in it that long. And even if I had stayed longer, I probably wouldn't have learned much because I wasn't that good at it. There's a reason I'm not doing it now.
Yeah.
But I have been, because of what I have done for a living, I've watched countless house flip shows and things about building houses and redesigning houses and all that stuff. What were some growing pains for you? What did you like wind up learning that you were like, oh man, like this is like a real house flip construction thing that I need to know that I had no experience with, and I need to like learn this. Like, what were some things that caught you by surprise, I guess?
So long story short, all of it. When I first started, I had no idea really how to do most stuff with the house. Now I can essentially build one from scratch. So obviously plumbing and wiring is a big deal, knowing how to do the electrical work and make a plumbing plan. But the thing that really mattered the most to me in the beginning was how to deal with the contractors. You know, we just had this conversation about credit score, which is your report card as an adult effectively. And most people who are in the game as being a contractor or working for a contractor are not going to be dealing with an employee the same way as you'd be dealing with if you were a law firm. It's a little bit different level of adulting, if you will. And getting over that hurdle of how to deal with that, having people not doing what they said they would do and being able to make it work, that was the biggest hurdle in the beginning. And then as we went along, I started having good people around me that I was hiring and good people teaching me how to select them. And then there would just be days where I would just sit and watch. There was a lot of way I learned, though, was with the inspector or with the appraiser going through the property and basically saying, you know, you're taking points off here. What would you rather have seen and why? And in that process, you quickly learn who actually knows what they're talking about and not. Because plumbing is pretty straightforward. It all has to go down. I mean, and air has to go up and the waste has to go down. So gravity does a lot of the work. And if it's not having gravity with it, it's not going to work. So it's there's some basic rules you have to follow, but that's the core gist of it. And I see guys that are trying to make things work that it's never going to work. And so that kind of thing, like having wastewater go uphill, it's never going to work. So with that being said, those are the types of things I learned. I learned about just basics, that each kind of wire has a different amount of power that can go through it. And if you exceed it, it will catch on fire. How do you regulate that? How do you know which is which? So those are the kinds of things that I ultimately learned up in terms of the actual technique of how to install them and the math behind what is acceptable. So the long story short, from the business side, what I really needed to know was how to deal with the employees and let them be in charge of the work. But once I started dealing around them enough, it was just picking things up and natural curiosity of how did you do this and why did you do this? So I could design the next one a little bit better. Because I personally hate hallways. And anytime I'm able to design a house with less hallways, the better the house is, because effectively speaking, hallways are wasted space. So if you can make the bedroom bigger by not having a hallway, it's a win. So figure out how to do that. And those were the kinds of things that I was constantly trying to grasp.
And I feel like you did this in a way. Now, I would not be brave enough to learn and start this type of business from scratch without really having much of a background. So I really give you a ton of credit for just having the the guts and courage to do that. But you did all of this in a way that I find I do a lot of things that I want to learn and do and really set my mind to. Do you, in hindsight, feel like that was the best approach for this? Or do you wish you had prepared more?
Um, I don't know if it was the best approach. Long story short, in terms of preparing more, I didn't give myself a chance to prepare at all. I just flat out, I knew I was leaving the other gig, and just what was I going to do? So I essentially chose what I was going to do on the potential of what I thought rentals were going to be, which in reality ended up not being totally accurate, somewhat accurate. So that was what I wanted. I knew I wanted residual income. And once I started from that point, the question really became how to get there, and how to get there in a way where I would be able to scale the business. And in the beginning, it was doing flips, buying rentals, and then eventually refinancing the rentals. Um, Actually, my first rental company, my partner bought me out of. So some of them last longer than others. That's the other thing. Not absolutely everything needs to be absolute and forever. Sometimes things just come to the end, and that's okay. So I don't know if doing more research would have helped, because the things that I ultimately failed on were relationship based. Sure, I could have done more research about how to design a better kitchen, which I eventually figured out. But the true failures that cost me the money were the relationship based issues, and with those, you just gotta do them, and there's no way around that. Like, in fact, actually, as you asked me, it's like pretty much every venture I've created has just been going for it, and then we're going to figure out how the process works while we're in it. When I first hit record my first ever podcast in 2017, I wasn't totally sure how it was going to work. I didn't know that you had to record an episode, then send it to Apple for their permission to get it published, and then you can start publishing regularly. I had no idea that that was a thing, and that's a thing for the whole industry of podcasting. Now I look at it like, oh, well, I guess it had to be that way, or else they'd have so many problems if they didn't. And going through that and just trying things is really the best way to learn. That being said, I do incredibly value thought experiments and trying to apply as many variables to a situation before you can. I think that that's very important for planning. I think it's the best way to plan, actually. But most of the time, I have done enough of those just in my head, where once I start something, I just want to go until there's a reason to slow down effectively.
So you brought up a topic that was coming up on my list of things to talk about, which is podcasting. And I know for me, when I started my podcast, it was basically people telling me. So I feel like I talk about this story all the time. And those who are listening, I apologize if you heard this story a billion times, but I, in 2016, left a job that I was at for 10 years. They were restructuring, offered me a buyout package, and I took it in order to explore new avenues in life. And I thought I was going to take a management path and continue on somewhere else. That didn't happen. I wound up just contracting. I'm still contracting, actually.
Mhm.
And I wanted to find something that fulfilled me in the same way as my previous job. So I, through a sequence of events and encouragement from people I met along the way, I decided to start this podcast. And when I decided to start this podcast, I don't know if I really listened to very many podcasts at all, and really couldn't say I was like a fan of anybody or anything. Just I got all this encouragement, and in my mind, I never viewed myself, even though I felt in my gut that being like an interviewer or presenter or something like that was there. I always kind of wrote it off for a number of reasons. Just didn't think I'd be the kind of person somebody would want to listen to or watch. But people that I met along the way, like really good people that I trust a lot and think a lot of, they encouraged me. And to make a long story short, I just kind of said, okay, I need at least a decent mic. I need, somewhere to record the episode. And I need to know, much like you figured out, how to get my episode to other people so people can listen. So I figured out like these really basic things and just kind of went for it and have learned along the way. So I guess for me to hear that you just basically learned as you went, not only with real estate, but also with podcasting, it really early on in this conversation, I was like, him and I are kind of kindred spirits a little bit. Beyond the Yinzer Pittsburgh connection, even though I'm not really from Pittsburgh because I couldn't even pronounce Duquesne correctly. But
yeah, no, I agree with you there. So it's actually interesting. So when I started the first one in 17, it was just quick Google search, figuring out what a podcasting hosting platform is, and just basically did what they told me to do. And thankfully, as I look at now, going through trying to figure out which ones the ones I did, the one I picked for Father and Joe was Buzzsprout, and they're fine. Don't get me wrong, that they're kind of built for podcasts that aren't doing a lot of volume on a monthly basis. They're built for exactly what Father and Joe is, a once a week episode. It's about half an hour to 20 minutes. It's perfect. But being what the essence of what Father and Joe was never built to be monetized. It was built to have conversations that was going to be pertinent to the world and hopefully try to heal it a little bit. Because in 2017, what drove me to start this was the transition from Obama to Trump in this country was not smooth. Pretty much people joined CNN or Fox and did not want to talk to each other, or at least that's what the internet made it seem like. The reality is most people didn't care and checked out. But for those that were in the constant talking about it, it was this impression that the sky was falling. So I essentially called up a priest who was on the radio station and said, would you like to try this? This doesn't seem that much different than radio you're doing anyway. Let's just see what happens. And this is the same microphone I used for gaming when I was in college. So it's not really like it's all this technical equipment or anything. The Steelers logo you mentioned here, it's not a special Steelers. This is Steelers duct tape that's holding my headset together from 2009. So the actual hardware element of it, I had no idea what I needed or not, but it's good enough. And that's really where I get down to it. Our podcast with him is strictly audio. So the fact that he's always traveling, and we did it through, we do normally just film it through Google. We don't even use Skype or anything. We just use Google Hangouts is what it was called. Now they changed to Google Meet. And then I found this real cheap software. It's like $15 and it just records any sound that goes through my computer. So I don't even have it in two different elements. So to do sound editing was really difficult at the beginning to figure out what we were doing wrong. And that was really what we started with, was just learning on the fly. And I forget exactly what year, it must have been 18 because it was before COVID. My father-in-law retired, and his retirement thing, he wanted to see the West Coast, particularly the Grand Canyon. And he just rented an RV, took his 4 high school age grandkids and my wife, and they just left. They just left for 3 months or 3 weeks rather. And when they came back, they had all of these pictures that they took with the iPhones. So they're all, 2-second moving pictures with a little bit of sound in the background. Long story short, I edited all of this, turned it into a 90-minute video, and we presented it as this big Father's Day gift to him, or Grandparents' Day, whatever it was. But this big long movie. But prior to that, I had never produced or edited a video before. So all of that was something that we did, and it turned out really well. I added a lot of layers to it that the whole project didn't need to be done. Like they could have just had the pictures and put them in an album forever. But going beyond something just to see if I could is something I've always wanted to do. And it's something that most people do not have. So when we see someone who's like us, that's willing to try and actually get off the couch and maybe fail, maybe not, but figure something out along the way. You know, if you would have asked me when I was in college, will you enjoy being a video editor? My answer would have been no. I don't like sitting behind a computer. I don't like being in a room. Why would I like doing that? But I just found so much joy in it, which then brings me to local football flavor, which we're launching now. Essentially, I don't. By the time you listen to this, it will have been launched, but it's a completely different animal than Father and Joe because now we're adding. It's a video podcast. It's going to be on YouTube. It's also target of monetization, which is an entire realm of podcasting that I never explored before. And it's something that there's ways if you're not good at sales to do. I found a couple of companies that will do that for ad reads or whatever. But if you do know how to do sales, there's so many vital ways you can integrate my sales experience, especially with presentations, into the product here, the podcast. It's very fun and great in that regard. So I'm really glad that I learned all this stuff along the way. And it really all started with something that I knew I wasn't going to get paid for, but then I ended up with a skill set at the end of it. So I helped people out. We made smiles and people enjoyed the things we did make it through here and there, but it's really just being willing to try something without a guarantee that you're ever going to get any economic benefit from it, or maybe not even any skill from it at all, depending upon what you put into it. So that was really the essence of what got me here as the behind the scenes pushing.
And I think I am also an example of some of these points that you're making because I have made very little, if anything, off of this podcast other than just meeting really great people and developing really great relationships and being really, inspired by everybody that I've met and have had the privilege to do an episode with. And I know for me, much like you, I also have that like certain something that drive in me that's like, look, and just from my perspective, when I made that transition from the job I had to being more of a contractor and having more time on my hands, I basically asked myself, what are some things I've always wanted to do that I haven't gotten to do? And I know at the time I was thinking, well, I always wanted to be like public speaker and talk about myself. I always wanted to like write a book, a screenplay. I didn't know that all that brainstorming was going to lead me to having like a show, a podcast. But I feel like this is giving me an opportunity to really work on some of those like dreams and just be able to maybe in 20, 30, 40 years from now, if I make it 40 more years, I can look back and say, well, I may have only made like $5 off that podcast and only made X amount of money trying to do these things, but I did it. I got it off my conscience. I tried and I really put my heart and soul into it. And I feel like we don't always have that opportunity because some of us, for a variety of reasons, don't get to have that time, whether we have family obligations or working too many hours, whatever it is. But I feel like I've been given kind of a gift to actually explore all this and really go for it, and just felt like this is the time in my life to do it. So I don't know if that's also something that played into all this for you, but I know it was that way for me.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of crossover there. And to your point, I think that the thinking about it and the mental brainstorming, as you put it there, is so valuable. Because to me, it's ultimately what answers the question of what next. And this just might be because I don't sell with high pressure. I don't like doing that. I like leading people down a pathway of what next, which gives many people many opportunities to take the exit to say this is not the right answer for me. But becoming time you get to the end where we're talking about passing checks around for services, you've had so many times to leave that you didn't want to. So my mind is kind of already that way because that's how I sell. And when I start thinking about how do I address this problem of society not being cool with each other and people not being able to communicate, well, what can I do about that? I can tell people exactly what I said, what my experiences are, what I'm seeing in the world. Because at the end of the day, I think I'm just a regular guy who just wasn't willing to listen to the word no from people that were telling me it that had no idea what they're talking about. So I essentially judge people on, do they know what they're talking about and why are they telling me no? Because if they're telling me no for a reason that's actually going to enhance what I'm doing, that's something worth listening. Well, then instead of, going at a 45-degree angle, maybe we go at a 90-degree angle. All right, that makes sense. That's not really a no either. And some people hear that as you shot down my idea, so you hate me. When it's reality, it's an improvement so we can make this work. And I think that having that brainstorming and the willingness to see what is really being told, really what's being communicated, is it an enhancement that I just haven't figured out or not? And the other part is being willing to do it to yourself, to look at an idea, eventually get to a stumbling block and figure out how to overcome it. And that's part of life. You not everything's going to go exactly the way you thought it would have. Or if it is, you didn't put enough detail in your original thinking. Long story short. So you got to be able to have the same concept of how I want to get there, but maybe be willing to adjust. I think about Eisenhower when he's sitting over in England, knowing I got to get to Europe. I'm not totally sure how we're going to do it, but I got to get to Europe. And he drew 6 different game plans on the board and said, this is the plan we're going with. But we also explored the idea of going through Norway, of coming up through the bottom. We had ideas. And this is ultimately D-Day. We're coming through France and all that stuff. So my point being is he changed the logistics of it, but the concept was we're getting to Europe. And I think that whatever the getting to Europe for you is something that you need to constantly think about and go. Like with Local Football Podcast, it was, or Local Football Flavor, sorry, saying too many words quickly here. It was, I was tired of hearing people telling me things I was wrong about the Steelers. I know for a fact that people were wrong. They were just saying stuff, but I also saw that they were getting paid to lie. And there was just something that was bothersome about that. And it didn't really even start with the concept that I wanted to get paid. It quickly grew into that. But it basically started with, I just want to correct the misinformation that's out there. And because it's abundant and it's everywhere, let's correct it. And that's really what Father and Joe is too. It's just from a mental and spiritual side. If you want to become a better person, fix yourself first. Don't try to think that the other side is going to fix if you're not going to fix yourself. That's in broad strokes what Father and Joe's about. So when I look at it, it's just have a core concept of what you want to do. And then we figure out the specifics of how. So that's what this really was just looking at it. How can we get it? And thankfully, I've done a lot of these types of episodes where I'm talking to other hosts and I've been exposed to people using different things. I don't use Skype. Obviously, you're using Skype here. I've seen a lot of different platforms that people use for how they do their podcasting, because for 3 years, I was just in my own bubble with how I was doing it. And I really hadn't pushed to go outside and communicate with other people. And by nature, I'm seeing how you record yours. We're filming here. I can see your background. I can see the setup of your recording area, just as you can see mine. And some of them I see similarities. Some of them are off the wall. But I'm also able to see what's successful and what's not when I look at the final product on the other side. So all of that to say that life is a trial and error game, but you have to be willing to jump into it. And most people are too afraid to jump in, let alone to see what will happen if you're there.
So a couple of things. You said a lot of really great things there. First of all, my actual like recording studio here, it was much cooler. If you watch the season 2 and season 3 episodes, I have vinyl hanging up and it's completely different. I just moved to Florida and it took enough just to get everything to where it is, because I have boxes like unopened to my right. I have cat tree behind me where a cat may or may not be laying in during the episode. And I may be moving again. So I'm only renting this house. May wind up moving to a house that my wife and I are going to buy. So I haven't done much at all with this studio. But to your point, yeah, you do learn a lot just from everybody's different technique and a way of going about it. And that's how you learn if, okay, I can do that. I like what they're doing. And that helps you to grow and evolve, which is one of the great things about doing this type of work. And I know that it's helped me a lot. It's helped me to grow. And I know I keep at least thinking about doing different things, and I have incorporated some of those things. And one thing that I also want to note that was really good that you said, you really don't know where life is going to take you. If you told me this time last year that I'd be doing Mark My Words in Florida, like I would have said, no, I'm not moving to Florida. That's not for like another 20 years. But here I am. And you just, like, if I could have drawn up my life perfectly, I would have graduated college in exactly 4 years, if not 3.5, which that totally didn't happen because I wound up dropping out and then coming back. And, I would have moved to California. I would have worked in Hollywood and I would have done all this stuff that I had thought about and mapped out. But life doesn't work that way. And that's a really important lesson no matter what. Ooh, a lot of air coming in here to my speaking zone here in my throat. Um, yeah, you can yeah, I lost my train of thought now.
Yeah, no, it's exactly. But as you were saying there, you don't know where it's going to end up. So the jumping on and participating is so valuable. And unfortunately, part of my life is I'm looking at a lot of different houses. So I see a lot of different people's living situations, and I've seen pretty much every demographic, every income range, and everything else. And the one thing that is universally true, and it doesn't matter about how much money people are making or not, the people that have a purpose for what they're doing in that day that is beyond entertainment and just sitting around and watching something, but actually going out and doing something, are always vastly happier than those that don't. So I see a lot of people that literally do not have to go to work, whether it be because the government's paying for them or because they are on a severance package and they are retired and the investments are taking care of them. So pretty much the other ends of the spectrum, super wealthy and living off of the system. And I've never seen anyone in either of those two categories happy. It's the people that are going out and trying to make their lives better. Now, better is different to every person. Some people, it's being a better mom. Some people, it's learning how to make a car that runs faster or build a model airplane. Some people, it's how do I get better ratings on my podcast? But it's something that's driving you that's beyond your own selfish relaxation desires. And, for some people, it's just, I want to lose 20 pounds and I'm just going to keep running, like whatever. But it's something that's motivating you to go. And like I said, the people that are always the saddest, most miserable people are those that don't do that. And because I know that to be true, I believe the best thing you do is force people to do that. But how do you force someone to want to keep going when they're retired and that effectively this is the dream they thought they were buying by working all those years, and they get really sad when they realize it's not what they thought it would be. Yeah, that's just an observation I've had from 11 years of seeing how people live and talking to them directly, like I said, for over a decade.
Well, if it's up to me, I hope that in 20 years from now, when I am at retirement age, beyond retirement age, that I'm still doing something like this, because this energizes me. This makes me feel like I have purpose. And having a podcast, starting a business, it's not for everybody, but I think we should all strive to find that thing that makes us feel like we have a purpose and gives us that kick and makes us feel a little more alive. And one of the points of me doing this show is to hopefully at least get people who are feeling the opposite of how you and I might be feeling to think about that and maybe explore what might help them to fulfill themselves a little bit more. So I hope, if nothing else, that this show helps some people to discover that.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that we discuss on Father and Joe. And at the end of the day, where it kind of comes out is there's essentially four virtues that the faith talks about. Not to get all churchy on everything, but you want to be able to have a purpose. And the way that the church calls it, it's temperance, prudence, courage, and justice. So do you have the courage to try to do something? Do you have the prudence, which is basically thinking things through, doing that brainstorming step that we talked about earlier? What does make me happy? What does give me that just joy? Like I want to start doing something. What is that? That's really what prudence is. And then, the courage to try it. And then what temperance is at the end of the day is really kind of just knowing where your place is. Not that you're underneath every single person's boot, nor are you the most important person in the universe. You're right in the middle with every other person and where we should be. You're just another guy at the end of the day. Sure, you might have some resources or some benefits, but at the end of the day, we all are the same people. We essentially all have the same brains and feelings inside of us. So what do we want to do with this potential of today? And that's what temperance is. And then justice is when it comes time to choosing who's my guest going to be on my show today. Do I pick someone who's going to give me the best episode? Or do I pick someone just because I haven't had whatever blank feature yet? I haven't had someone who wears red glasses on my show yet. I haven't had someone who wears a hat on my show yet. That has nothing to do with the best quality. So really looking at just those four things from very broad scale is how we get to living a happier, more fulfilled life. And it's something we all can do just with the relationships around us. And most people, the answer is actually relationships and not jobs. As you were saying, you do this because you feel the fulfillment of it. You're able to reach out and connect with people. And that's what most people are, is relationships are what make them better. Like I know I've seen so many people that just became first-time grandparents, and it's like something just restart in their life. Like this little kid that's not theirs is now in their life, and they're just happy about it. It's something that we all can do, is just have a better relationship. And a very simple starting point is call someone you wish you had a better relationship with today. At the end of the day, do you wish you had a better relationship with whoever? We all can think of someone. Actually, just call them. And it's amazing how little steps like that, it might seem like nothing. It's a 10-minute phone call to a guy from college you haven't talked to in forever. But next thing you know, things just start turning on inside you that you don't even know what's happening. And you wake up a month or so later and you're feeling so much better about yourself and you're exploring this, that, and the other idea. That's how life works for those who want to participate in it. And it can start today with putting 10 numbers into a phone and hitting a little green button. It's not that hard if you want to try it.
I couldn't have said it better, much like pretty much everything you've said in this episode. And I think we're about to the point where we probably need to wrap this up.
Fair enough. Sorry for talking too much.
Sorry, I could keep talking. You have been fantastic and you've said a lot of really great things. So I thank you for being on Mark My Words today. And I'll give you an opportunity to tell people how they can find you, how they can work with you, and how they can find your shows.
Sure. So in the real estate world, the easiest, the website, or the email rather, let's use our words right. The email that we use to talk to people is number 412, the word homes @gmail.com. I'm not really creative there. 412 is the area code for Pittsburgh. It's 412homes@gmail.com. That's on a professional real estate level. You can reach out to us at either one of the podcasts by either subscribing to them. The first one is called Father and Joe, 3 words. Father and Joe. And the second one is also 3 words, local football flavor. Again, that's local football flavor.
Awesome. Well, Joe Rockey, thank you very much for being on Mark My Words. Go check him out. He's a podcast host ×2, and he also flips homes and knows a whole lot more about homes and construction and finance and all that stuff than certainly I do. And it was great to be enlightened by your knowledge and expertise and just what you've learned in life and through your ups and downs through entrepreneurship. So thank you again for being on the show. And that's all we have time for. So that's Mark My Words. I'll see you soon. Thanks again for taking time out of your busy day to listen to Mark My Words. If you would like to connect with me beyond the show, you can find me on LinkedIn at Mark Schmidt, where I will be talking about entrepreneurship, careers, and anything else that is on my mind. You can also connect with me on Twitter and Instagram at Nimrod1979 and Nimrod79 respectively. This podcast also has a page on Instagram at Mark My Words. And finally, if you want to leave me a voicemail or check out what I'm up to with the podcast, come find me at podpage.com/Mark-My-Words. Thanks again for listening, and I'll be back with a new episode soon. Bye for now.